I'm Shelden Martin. I'm the team orthopedic surgeon here for Hamilton High School, and I take care of some of the pro teams here in town, the Arizona Cardinals, the Coyotes, the Diamondbacks, and the Rattlers arena football team. I just want this to be very informal for you guys, give you guys an idea of what does it take after high school to kind of get to this point in life. Who has an interest in going into medicine, do they think? So, almost all of you guys. Okay. So what do you want? What's your name?
Aurora.
Aurora?
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot.
Oh, okay.
What are you thinking about?
After like all the medical school and all that and residency, I want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon.
Okay, so CT surgeon. Okay, great. How about you?
Maybe something like pharmaceutical type things.
Okay. All right, good. So completely, kind of different line, but still within medicine, right? Did you raise your hand?
I guess an ultrasound technician.
Okay.
Like someone who does ultrasounds.
That's pretty specific. How did you come up with that?
I don't know. Like I just researched it and I just kind of thought I wanted to do it.
Have you ever had an ultrasound done or seen somebody that's done an ultrasound?
Mm-hmm. My sister.
Your sister has had one done for a baby?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were with her when she had the ultrasound done?
My aunt is an ultrasound technician.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
All right, so that's pretty cool,
And
right?
I've been to work with her, so it's pretty fun.
Oh, you followed her on a day of work? Great. That's very cool. And that's a great thing to do for you guys, by the way, is start volunteering and get into the line of, go spend some time with a cardiothoracic surgeon, right? And because, many of us are very open to having you guys follow us around and talk to you and show you what it's really like a day in the life of a cardiothoracic surgeon. That's the best exposure you can get. So, coming to the office with me and spending the day in the office, seeing, what it is that I do on a daily basis, either in the operating room or in the office seeing patients is the best way to get exposure and an idea of what it's really going to be like to do that. Because, when I was in high school as a junior senior, I didn't really know what it's like, on a daily basis. And so I started volunteering in the emergency room, got a little exposure there, and in high school I had an idea that's what I wanted to do was be a surgeon. But in some ways it's very different than what I expected it to be. So the sooner that you can get some exposure, hands-on exposure, volunteering like that, the better. What I'd like to do is just kind of go through the sequence and give you an idea of what it's been like from the time I was in high school to the time it is now, and what that sequence is. So it sounds like a lot of you have already done some research and are pretty educated about what it requires. So I knew in high school, or thought I knew, that I wanted to become a surgeon. So I kind of been on that track the whole way through. Some people take very circuitous routes to get to become physicians. But for the most part, the majority of physicians finish high school, go to a 4-year college, get your bachelor's of science or bachelor's of art in anything. You don't have to major in a science or be a pre-med major. I mean, in medical school, I had co-classmates who were literature majors or history majors. So you can major in anything. Really, all that matters is the test that you have to take called the MCAT, which is kind of the pre-screening entrance exam to get into medical school. It's how well you do on that, okay? And so it's really critical that you do well on that test. So you go through college, you get your bachelor's. So that's, I go through these huge blocks of time very quickly because and it's probably a disservice to you guys to appreciate, how much of your life, right? How much time it takes to get to where I am. So 4 years of college, then you go to medical school, right? Which is going to be 4 years. So you take your MCAT, and the better you do on all these tests the whole way through, the easier it is for you in this pathway, right? Because there are lots of people that start this pathway and it's like a funnel, right? It's going to taper down the further you go, because you're going to have lots of people in high school that say they want to be docs, and they get into college and they find something else that they're more interested in, or they don't do well enough on tests to get the scores to get into medical school. So there are people that are falling off the path the whole way. So the way you got to think about it is, if you really want to truly do any of these things, right, CT surgeon, OB-GYN, you got to look at the end point, okay? You got to look at, okay, that's the end point. What does it take to get there and find the straightest path there? And so people fall off this path, right? It's a very large group of people in the beginning that want to take that path, and as you go on this long, long path, more people fall off. So it's, the start of that path is 4 years of college, and you're probably not going to get into medical school if you've got a 1.2 GPA. I was 35 until I finished residency and really started practicing, So it's like half your life almost that you're giving up to train to get to that point, right? So the more time you spend in the early years doing other things, so I did research for 2 years. So, I was probably 2 years older than the average person, but on average it's probably 33, 34 when you finish your medical training, and now you can actually start working as a doctor, okay? So the higher your GPA is, the better, right? So you just shoot to do the best you can in everything, right? So if you only got a 3.2, does it mean you're not going to get into a good college? No, you can get into a good college with a 3.2, but then when you're in college, if you kind of goof off and don't get good grades and you got a 1.2, are you going to get into medical school? Probably not. Or it's going to be really, really tough. You're going to have to ace your MCAT exam, right? You're going to have to get a perfect score on that, because that'll look very impressive to the committee, and they'll say, wow, look at this person, they got a perfect MCAT score, they're brilliant. Oh, wait a minute, what's this 1.2 GPA in college? This means they were goofing off, so they're probably not disciplined enough to really make it through medical school, because it takes discipline. The further along you get, the more discipline it takes, okay? And the more focused you have to be on that goal, and the less time you have for other things and other activities. So if you get out of high school, you go into college, and you're playing 3 sports, and you're in a sorority or a fraternity, and you're goofing off playing video games and all this stuff. Doesn't mean you can't do those things. No, it doesn't mean it at all. But the more other activities that are consuming your time, the more focused you have to be on your studies, okay? So the most important things to getting to that end point is keeping your GPA as high as you possibly can, doing well on that MCAT exam that you're going to take your junior year of college, getting the highest score you can on that. Being diversified, so actually being active in all these other things. If you look at most medical students, they were very active in high school and very active in college. So they were athletes, they were in clubs. So I was a 4-sport athlete in high school, honor society, whatever, all these different things. That makes you look more attractive to the committee, okay? So they want to see you not necessarily just killing your MCAT and then kind of slacking off and having a low GPA and no activities. They want to see activities. They want to see a decent GPA. So I'd say, to be safe, a 3.5 and above is going to be pretty safe. But if you got a 3.9, great. If you got a 3.4, does it mean you won't get in? No, it's just going to be harder. You're going to have to kind of bring these other things up, right? So be really active, have a really good MCAT score. So it's all of these things together that the committee's looking at. After you take your MCAT in your junior year of college, then you start applying to medical school. And again, this is kind of the typical course, right? And you'll get interviews, so you get past the initial screening phase, which is the committee reviewing your file and looking at your grades, your MCAT scores, your activities. And if you make it past that initial screening phase, then you get interviews, right? So you get all these interview invitations coming in from all the schools that you've applied to. And another thing, this is expensive, right? It's very expensive, this process. So it's like, it used to be $100 each school that you applied to. And you had to apply to 30 schools, right? If you apply to 2 schools, what are your chances of getting accepted at any 2 schools? It's pretty low, right? You're competing with 10,000 other applicants. So you just got a shotgun approach, blanket mass apply to every school out there. And if you get 10 interviews, that's fantastic. I think I got probably 7 interviews for medical school. I went to LaSalle University in Philadelphia for college. To medical school, I got accepted to Georgetown, probably had like 7 interviews for medical school, was accepted at Georgetown, and then same thing through medical school. You know, there are people that even this far into it, so you're now probably, well, I took 2 years off for research at the University of Pennsylvania, so that was, 2 more years. So I was probably like 23 when I started medical school. But if you stay on track, you don't take time off to do other things, you're going to be like 21, right? 20, 21, 22 coming out of college, and you go right into medical school. You're going to now be into this for all of your college, right? College isn't cheap, and I got scholarships, but I still had to borrow money from the FAFSA federal government program. And then medical school is not cheap. Georgetown was, at that time, in 2000 and 2004, was $50,000 a year to live with tuition. And it was hard to get scholarships at that level. At that level, you're pretty much dependent on, if you're independently wealthy, which I was not, my parents were not, so they couldn't afford to, really pay my schooling from that point on. So you're pretty much just living on federal government loans. So 50 grand a year, right? And now it's probably 60 grand a year, Georgetown. But Georgetown's one of the most expensive. Now you can do in-state schools, right? So if you live in Kentucky, you can go to the University of Kentucky. You'll have a much lower tuition being in-state. But the bottom line is still very expensive. I mean, on average, coming out of medical school, the statistic out there is probably somewhere like $250,000 in debt, that you're coming out of medical school. So that's the reality of it. And, I've talked to physical therapists and athletic trainers that have wanted to go to medical school. They've been doing training for a while and they wanted to go back to medical school, and they simply couldn't do it from a financial standpoint, right? Because they had a family and they needed to raise their kids. And how could they be, taking a loan when it's 50 grand a year and not have time to work? Because in medical school, you really don't have much time to work. By the time you get to medical school, there are very few students that kind of drop out at this point, because you're kind of all in at this point, right? You've got all this loan to pay back, but there's some people at that point, they realize they either just can't cut it, so to speak, right? They can't dedicate the focus and the attention that's needed to studying that much, or they just don't have an interest in it. But for the most part, it's a high retention rate at that point. So the first 2 years of medical school are just all classroom, and then years 3 and 4 are more hands-on clinical rotations. So you're getting into the hospitals and you're doing all the different medical rotations. So you're doing, the way we divide medicine from an academic standpoint is surgery and medicine, okay? So surgery, you've got all the different surgical fields, orthopedic surgery, which is operating on the musculoskeletal system, cardiothoracic surgeon, which is operating on the heart and the lungs. OB-GYN is a surgical, falls under the surgery. Then you've got all the medical specialties. So internal medicine, neurology, pulmonology of the lungs, rheumatology, which is medical doctors that take care of joints, people that have rheumatoid arthritis that affects their joints, but they're not surgeons, so they're not doing surgery on patients. So all of these different medical subspecialties. And that's when you get exposure to all of those, your 3rd and 4th year, and that's when you decide what you want to go into. And pretty early on, you kind of gravitate towards either a surgical mentality or a medical mentality. And so pretty quickly you kind of find your way, and I knew right away I couldn't stand my medical rotations. I was bored out of my mind, and I was very attracted to surgery. I loved being in the operating room, working with my hands. I had always been that way. Growing up, I think we are predestined and kind of genetically hardwired to think a certain way. And the medical doctors, they like, thinking academically about what are all the different reasons that this patient is coughing, okay? As surgeons, we're much more practically oriented and hardwired. I don't really necessarily care about the 15 different ways that, or problems or diseases that could be causing a cough. I just want to fix the problem, okay? We have a huge impact on patients' quality of life because they come to us with really bad arthritic knees or shoulders, or an athlete tears their ACL on the field. You know, they're limping around on crutches. We do a surgery, we reconstruct their ACL, and in 6 to 12 months, they're back playing football or soccer or hockey again, okay? And so we have a huge impact on making patients' lives better. And you know, that's really the ultimate payoff for us, right? Is seeing that every day in the office, helping people get better, because that's very gratifying and very rewarding. And so, you know, early on in your career paths, thinking that I want to do this because I think surgeons make a lot of money and this is the way I want to make money, I would say you will not make it to the end. You will burn out long before, because that path is long and that endpoint is far away. And just doing it for the money, you know, in the end, do surgeons make a good living? Yeah, I mean, I live comfortably, but you know, I'm still paying off my loans, right? So I'm 6.5 years into practice after finishing my residency and my fellowship. I'm still paying off my loans from the government. So the best insurance really against medical malpractice or being sued is, it's been shown time and time again, is having good relationships with your patients, right? Spending time with your patients. And it's counterintuitive in that when, you know, we're all gonna have bad outcomes, you know, patients that didn't have a good experience or didn't have a good outcome, you know, with surgery or without surgery, who aren't happy, right? For a whole myriad of reasons, right? And most times it's not physician error. It's not because the doctor made a bad decision or a wrong decision or did the wrong thing or did a bad surgery. You know, there are lots of reasons. It's lack of patient education, just not understanding, but probably the number one contributor to a lawsuit occurring in a situation where there was a bad outcome is the patient felt like they were alienated, okay? So the patient had a bad outcome and they come back to their doctor and they feel like their doctor's not supporting them or getting them through this experience. So what happens is when we as physicians have a patient who has a bad outcome, we want to remove ourselves from that because we don't like bad outcomes, right? We all like to be successful, right? And so we don't like to admit to ourselves subconsciously like, ah, man, this was a bad outcome, you know, whether it was my fault or not. So if I have a patient that had a bad outcome with surgery, they just didn't do well, they're not happy, you know, I could have done the best surgery. You know, maybe they were a smoker, maybe they were obese, maybe they're diabetic, maybe they're undereducated, and all of those reasons were really the reason they had a bad outcome. It had nothing to do with me. I did a great surgery. Well, maybe it was my fault because maybe I shouldn't have even operated on, you know, maybe I shouldn't have operated on the surgery. Maybe I should have counseled them better before surgery. So there are a number of reasons why patients have bad outcomes, but when they do have that outcome, you have got to spend time with that patient, right? And it's a little bit painful to do that because you want to, I got 40 other people to see, right? I got to keep moving, right? There's not much time to see patients, but I've got to invest in that patient and help them through. I may not be able to make their experience, you know, their outcome better, but just spending the time and supporting them and listening to them, patients will feel like they're being supported by their doctor and help through this experience, and they're very, very unlikely to sue, okay? And so, you know, it's probably actually a very small number of lawsuits that occur in terms of the total number of patient encounters, right? So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's obviously an issue, right? So we have medical malpractice. I think we pay like $30,000 a year for medical malpractice, so that's another expense, right? Yep, out of your pocket. No one else is paying it for me. So, you know, that goes to the issue of it's very expensive to run a medical practice, right? Whether you're a solo practitioner or you're part of a big group, you know, nothing's for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And so the expenses are coming back to me, you know, one way or another. There are many different routes to getting a job, but, you know, essentially you start calling up people that, a lot of it is through connections that colleagues across the country that maybe were ahead of you in training. So, and they're somewhere where you want to go, and they're in a group and they're looking to bring on another physician that specializes in what you're training to do. So it happens that way a lot. It's much more about your connections at that point and knowing people rather than taking a test, right? At that level, they don't really care what your test scores were. They just want a real person, right? Because they're going to have to be your partner for a while. So at that level, you've now gotten past kind of scoring well on your tests. They assume that you've gotten to this point, you've done well on tests. Now it's about going in, meeting a group of partners, having dinner with them, meeting their spouses, and feeling like you have a connection and you fill a need in their group and their practice, right? So they're looking for an OB-GYN doc. You're going to go in, meet the partners. You all get along. Geographically, it makes sense for you. That's probably the first criteria you're going to really search for. It's like, where do you want to live? Whether you're single or whether you got a family, where do you and your family want to spend the rest of your career? But the statistic is that 50% of people leaving training and starting a job will change that job in the first 2 years, and 70% will change in the first 3 years. So the first job you take, you're unlikely to stay there. You're going to move. Whether it's just move to a different group within the same town or move to a completely different town because your spouse is miserable there. But again, if you're thinking, I'm going to go into medicine because I want to get rich, don't do it, because you're probably not going to make it. You're just, you need to be going into it for the right reasons. A couple of reasons. One, because it's what you enjoy, right? It's what you're interested in. Two, you're social, you like people, right? Because you're going to be dealing with people every day, lots and lots of people. I can see 50 patients a day in the office, right, on a really busy day. Average, 35 to 45 patients. So you're walking in and, seeing 50 people. A lot of those are new patients, right? So I may see 10, 15 new patients a day in the office. And you're developing a relationship with these people. Many of them you will operate on, and there's a special bond, when you have a person's life in your hands on the operating table, and you're it, right? Their life is in your hands. Now you got a lot of people to help you, an anesthesiologist, you got an assistant, a PA, you've got a scrub nurse, a scrub tech. So there are lots of people on the team, but you're the leader of the team. You're the captain of the ship, right? And so ultimately the responsibility for that patient's life is in your hands. That's a huge responsibility, and it's one that I take seriously every single surgery and every single day. But it's a gift, it's a blessing to have that opportunity, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love it. I love what I do, and that's what you have to go into medicine for, because that's ultimately what will drive you every day to get up at 4 in the morning, to go work out before you got to be in during your residency.